in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode number 188 of Let's Go Racing. Tyler Jones, Dominic Aragon here with you as we look back at Chase Elliott's win at Atlanta, his home track. It was quite the party in Dawsonville over the weekend. We'll discuss that and more. Also, look ahead to Chicago this weekend as NASCAR hits the streets of the Windy City for what could potentially be the very last time. We'll talk about that. We'll also get to our headlines across the sport, and we'll get to our mailbag segment coming up in just a little while from right now. Dominic, let's start off the top right away. Chase Elliott getting a win at Atlanta. It had been well over a calendar year since Chase Elliott had been back into victory lane, but he gets it done there at his home track. This is a big deal for that 9 team. They've had fast cars. They just haven't been able to punch it through to get into victory lane here. What'd you make of their performance on Saturday night there?
Well, it just looks like the 19 just capitalized when it mattered the most. That big wreck, the 23 car pileup at the end of stage one, beginning stage lap 69, whenever that had happened, Tyler, that took out most, if not all, of the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series winners. So everyone else that was remaining with a non-damaged car or still a competitive car knew this was going to be an opportunity to capitalize. And we almost saw that with Brad Keselowski. We saw an opportunity with Tyler Reddick to take the lead, Alex Bowman, but it was Chase Elliott timing that at the perfect time. Does this shut up his haters? Does this shut up the people that think, well, it's just a drafting track win? Well, not just a drafting track when it's still a part of the schedule. He's ended his dry spell. And we know in this sport that momentum breeds momentum. 20th career win, but you're right. It had been over a calendar year. We were at that last win at Texas last April. Remember how popular of a victory that was with that Hooters paint scheme. Only even more popular, 10 times more popular with his Atlanta win this time around. Jeff Gluck, a friend of the show and reporter for The Athletic, had wrote in one of his stories, he talked to him in an interview where it asked him the question, but Chase wishes that he could have bottled up how he felt at the end of that Atlanta race and relive that forever, or at least have that something he could carry the rest of his life because he just wanted to soak that all in. That you could tell that win was extra special being from his home track.
No doubt about it. And Chase Elliott, that 9 team, we know that they've had speed, but they've had their share of issues. Alan Gustafson's been one to get a lot of criticism this year, kind of the brunt of it, if you will. And they've been competitive, but they haven't been up to the standard of within their own house with the 24 car and with the 5 car. And I look at this way, Dominic. It is a big deal for them to get a breakthrough win here at Atlanta. But on the flip side, too, this is still a drafting track. I don't think, you raise the banner, you're excited you're in the playoff, that you got the win off your back. But I still don't really think it changes much of maybe any doubt and disbelief and trying to turn things around until they win a race on another non-drafting track of sorts. I think this 9 team still has a lot to prove. What say you?
I see where you're coming from too, because just the results haven't stacked up to what we remember Chase Elliott doing in this car in 2022. He led the competition with 5 victories and made the championship 4, and he looked like the title favorite that year. We haven't seen that speed out of Chase since his injury in 23. But nonetheless, and we've talked about it so much on the show, but it's always worth revisiting. The season Chase Elliott is having right now, the knocking off the top 5 and top 10ing the field to death, if you will, and leading select laps, picking up stage points. Probably 30 competitors of those 36 chartered field cars would love to have the season that Chase Elliott has every year, but we know Hendrick Motorsports has the bar set a little higher for their drivers and for their competitors and their partners. This is not a Chase Elliott typical season that we are coming to expect. Yes, it's his 20th career win, and that's a milestone in itself, but we're not seeing the Chase Elliott we've seen of past. I think you're still going to see the critics until Chase Elliott goes out and say, leads 50 laps this weekend at Chicago or goes and knocks out a win at Watkins Glen. He leads all active drivers, as we know, on the road courses. And we'll talk more about that later in the show, but he has yet to win in a road course in this vehicle.
Yeah, it's crazy that hasn't happened yet, but we'll see. One thing also, Dominic, I would throw this out there. We mentioned about Alan Gustafson. The 48 team with Blake Harris isn't doing too hot themselves, especially the last month, compared to the speed they had at the beginning of the season. if Chase Elliott doesn't get another win sometime soon, I would, I think we both believe that the 48 is still going to make the playoff too. We know the nine's going to be in there now. I wouldn't be shocked, Dom, if we see a potential crew chief swap before the playoffs begin. If Gustafson went to the 48, if Blake Harris went to the 9 car, potentially.
I think maybe during the season, personally, could be a stretch, but stranger things have happened. They continue on this trajectory. They continue on this pathway. We've seen Hendrick Motorsports, Rick Hendrick, not afraid to go in and shake it up when necessary. And what in the past we had Jeff Gordon paired up with Casey Kane because they felt that maybe that team needed a little more help with Jimmy Johnson, work with Dale Earnhardt Jr. Maybe we see some sort of swap of sorts. Maybe we do see a crew chief swap. But to do it mid-season, I feel like that's when you fire like a head coach during the NFL season. There's still 7 or 8 games left in the year. Does it really do much? Is it going to move the needle much? I don't think so. But we're not in those shops every day. We're not hearing those conversations. We're not seeing that prep work that goes in. I'm thinking Rick Hendrick's going to let these guys finish out the year, but they do continue on this trajectory. Something's got to give because this is not the Hendrick Motorsports bar we're used to. Yes, they're winning races. They're finishing top 5 and top 10, but it's not the straight out dominance that we have come to know of Hendrick Motorsports.
This was the first race of the in-season challenge, Dom.
How's your bracket?
I did not fill out a bracket
Okay.
because I think that having this thing this late in the season is a stupid idea. I thought this would have made much more better sense in March or April. Now like the focus is the playoff. Like we're waiting on the playoff here, and like I think this is a distraction for the playoff. But nonetheless, I'll say this, Dom, like for me, it's not a perfect science by any stretch. I think the timing is off of when they're doing this. I think it's kind of hard to follow. And, you know, TNT, I thought did a decent job for the broadcast, but they made it kind of difficult to follow the matchups going on in this in-season challenge here. And that didn't make things easier. I think you kind of got an idea towards the end of who advanced and whatnot. But it was exciting, and especially when you see how many wrecks we saw at Atlanta here, and who crashed out, and Denny Hamlin, the top seed, being eliminated already. Kind of like a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament, upsetting one with Ty Dillon there. Um, it I'll say this, like it's a good concept, but there's a lot of tweaking that needs to be done to this. There's got to be a better way to approach this, I think.
And let's be real here. Atlanta was picked not by accident, not by design. 'Cause I know there were, I think if I remember right, there were fans that were eligible for prizes too, and NASCAR made a big deal out of it. And they made sure to say that there were zero perfect brackets after this race. And sure, it's maybe not April, it's not March. I think NASCAR did that on purpose there too, because they want to offset this and give some sort of midseason buzz. Because this is about the time of year where we're would you agree we're in the repetitive part of the season? We're not to the playoffs yet, but we know who's more or less going to be racing in the playoffs. We have seen teams try and R&D their way through the summer and try to get better notebooks for the fall time. So here's an opportunity to try to keep it as competitive as possible.
I think also a big part of it was to satisfy TNT to give them something for their 5 race package. Because TNT, they got that alt cast going with Jeff Burton and Larry McReynolds. That's all about the in-season challenge, and they're talking about it on the broadcast. I think they could do a better job graphics wise of identifying the matchups and where things stand. But to me, like I think it was a lot of it had to do with TNT and giving them something since they don't have a ton of races here.
That makes sense. 5 races too. And by the way, yeah, first race back since 2014. And the altcast idea, you being a football guy, I believe that was taken from the Monday Night Football approach that ESPN and ABC are doing, correct? So kind of a mirror of that.
Yeah. What was different about it was that they it was not like a guest driven show like the Manning cast is, like you watch the Manning cast with Peyton and Eli, and here's Bill Belichick 1 quarter, and here's Kevin Hart another quarter. The only guest they had on was Chipper Jones, the former Atlanta Braves baseball player. Otherwise, it was nitty gritty with Barton and Larry Mack all night long. So I thought that it's a good idea in theory, but they could have done a lot more with it. That's how I would kind of, whether it's that or the TNT broadcast or the in-season challenge, like there's a lot of good ideas being thrown around, but what I'm noticing is that we're lacking kind of a finished product of sorts in all these things. Nothing's perfect.
Sure, it's working out the bugs, figure out what's going to happen. Star-studded cast when you think about Jeff Burton and Larry McReynolds. Those two do bring a lot to the table as far as a wealth of experience behind the wheel and atop the pit box. But be curious if they bring in some more people over the next 4 weeks and a great opportunity to do that. Maybe past winners, people that have been a part of the industry. Here's a great opportunity during different stages because we don't have quarters, we don't have periods, but we do have stages. Maybe you bring in somebody with even more expertise. So here's a great opportunity, I think, to educate fans too. And plus, it gives an alternative thing to the traditional broadcast as well.
Bring in some celebrities, like what's Tom Cruise doing? We know he's a NASCAR fan. Blake Shelton, these guys, let's, have some fun with it. I think there's a lot of opportunities to potentially work with that and see
Good
where
ideas.
things go from there. When it comes to the in-season challenge, Dom, after Denny got knocked out as the top seed, I think this thing's pretty wide open the next few weeks. How do you think this is all going to play out? If you had to pick one driver, who do you think wins the in-season challenge right now?
Man, that's a great question because you look at the bracket and everyone's busted, right? But you still have some good guys. You have Brad Keselowski, Alex Bowman, Bubba Wallace, who are still a part of it. Chase Elliott, of course, your winner from Atlanta, a big part of it. And he's going head to head this weekend with John Hunter Nemechek. It's still wide open because we've seen the last years, Tyler, we've not seen a full race play out on the streets of Chicago just yet because 2023 had the shortened event due to the darkness and they had an overtime, but it technically wasn't. And then last year, the rain had an effect on it too. So we know with a somewhat decent sample size that Chicago can certainly be another opportunity for a wild card. SVG won that race, and he was, I believe, 80-1 from odds makers. Alex Bowman was 75-1 last year to win that race, and he did. So you have two back-to-back wild card races. This in-season tournament could end up benefiting a driver and a team that could probably use that money and stretch that money a lot further than, say, a Chase Elliott at Hendrick Motorsports or Chris Buescher at RFK Racing. When you still have drivers like a Ty Dillon with colleagues still in it, I think here's an opportunity for these smaller teams to be able to come out and have a great opportunity, like we saw with Michael McDowell and Spire with the All-Star Pit Crew Challenge.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Huge chance for them to prove themselves and make a statement here potentially. Meanwhile, the playoff picture, let's talk about that, Dom. We are now up to 12 drivers in the playoff. We all anticipated that Chase Elliott would be in the playoff anyway, but now he locks up a spot with that win. So that means that we have four spots up for grabs still. And obviously, if we get more than 16 winners, then we can adjust accordingly from there. But you look at the playoff picture now, your 12 winners include Larson, Hamlin, and Bell with 3 wins. And then Byron, Blaney, Cindric, Logano, Briscoe, Barry, SVG, Elliott, and Ross Chastain, each with 1. And then your next four that are above the cutoff, Reddick at plus 128, Chris Buescher at plus 52, Bowman at plus 39, and Bubba Wallace at plus 23. Don, let's start with the four guys that are above the cutoff line. I think those four guys probably aren't too concerned when it comes to points compared to the guys on the outside. I think if you look at those who are on the outside right now, Priest 29, 23 back, Eric Jones 49 back, AJ Allmendinger 59 back, Carson Hocevar 62, and Kyle Busch 72 back. Like that's a big gap they have on the guys that are outside in points. If you're one of those four drivers, I don't think you're worried about the points situation so much. I think you're just worried about those guys getting a win and stealing a spot from you. That's your concern right now. Is that what you think?
I think you're Tyler Reddick. That's certainly true. You have a lot more cushion than some of these other guys, but a win by somebody else is going to tighten up that playoff picture because we have 3 road courses coming up over the next 5 weeks. You have Sonoma, you have Chicago this week, and you have Sonoma the following week. So we're going back-to-back road courses, and then 3 out of the next 6. You have Watkins Glen later this August, right before the playoffs start, and then you have Daytona. 12 winners. I know in 2022, when this car was introduced, we had 17 winners entering the playoffs, but because Kurt Busch was out with his concussion protocols, all the playoff spots were filled up by winners. But had he been back, we would have had one winner sitting out the playoffs. I don't know, Tyler. Are we going to get close to that? We have an opportunity for it. We have the recipe for some new winners. These road courses certainly open up a lot of opportunity for that. Daytona, of course, can too. But how realistic is it that we could have a full field of playoff drivers with a victory, in your opinion?
I think it's possible, but one thing I would say too, Dom, that I keep an eye on is I mentioned that we've only had three drivers this year with three wins. I think eventually in the next couple of weeks, the balance has gotta shift a bit, where we talk about William Byron finally getting his second win, Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, uh, Ross Chastain, these other guys here, like, you know, it's been unusual, or even more wins for the guys at the top, Larson, Hamlin, Bell. It is unusual the lack of win amounts we've seen from those guys. I think that sooner than later, somebody's got to take off and get on a run and start, uh, you know, uh, stashing pennies here, counting pennies, stacking pennies, uh, and collecting these wins because we just haven't seen a ton of multi-win drivers yet.
No, we haven't. And it's given that shade to 2022, 2023 when we did have a ton of winners during the regular season. Three victories. I think Kyle Larson got the fourth win of his season, but that was in Indianapolis last year. So this would be about the time where we're seeing some of these drivers stack up multiple victories. And it wouldn't shock me if we're talking about an SVG victory in one of these next few race weekends at one of these road courses, like he did last year. He was able to carry himself through to the playoffs in multiple rounds because of victories during the regular season at those road courses. Could happen again.
Very well could. Let's look ahead to this weekend at Chicago, the street course. Um, Dom, this race, you had your doubts when it came to the NASCAR Cup Series. You said this was going to be a failure for NASCAR.
I
Going
didn't say you can't take my words out of context. I said it depends on who is in office, if who the mayor office is, if their administration wants to continue the race. That if they don't want to continue the race, that they will scrap it. I did say that. Yes,
the
got
very
to
first
correct
year,
me.
you said this was going to be a failure for NASCAR going into that weekend.
I didn't
Uh,
say it was going to be a failure. I did say it's going to depend on that administration if it's a flop. I did say that.
he
Depending on who the
he
next mayor was going to be. Let's go. We'll have to go fact check this, but yes, I did say that.
he had his concerns. He
I
had
had my
his.
concerns. Yes.
Don was not a fan of NASCAR going to Chicago.
No, I wasn't on board. I was not sure how it was going to all play out. It was more from I didn't care about the racing product one way or the other. It was more, is this race going to be continuing beyond the first year? Are they going to see this as a failure for the city and a flop? Not NASCAR calling. Let's get it right here, Tyler.
I do appreciate like actually hearing Dominic be somewhat critical for once because he's not very, critical very often. He's kind of happy go jolly all the time. So I do like getting, a stir out of him here a little
Tyler
bit.
likes to rile up people. Yes. Yeah. He knows how
Right.
to say the right things and push the right buttons.
Yes. But uh, with that said, Dominic was a doubter in this race. Here we are a few years later. I was at the very first race. Um, we've seen some issues with rain, but yet they've made it work as much as they could. They've had the music festival go along with it. It's done a lot for Chicago, been a great Fourth of July weekend celebration. I think it's been overall a success, but Dom, the future of this race is in question. And it's not so much having to do with Chicago. It's the fact that NASCAR sees what they have here of, hey, we can take this to different places. And it seems like momentum is leading towards San Diego next year
Hmm.
of doing a race in San Diego. And there's a limit on the schedule of races that can be taken away in order to make this happen and to do this. And so I think two things can be true here, Dom, that the NASCAR race in Chicago has been a success, but they are likely moving on, not because it wasn't, but because they want to move this around and take this other places. and see what they can do with it because you can't just have a lot of street races here and take away a bunch of races from some of these NASCAR owned tracks. Kind of like what they've done with the Clash. You're moving it from the Coliseum to Bowman Gray, and it's
Yeah.
probably going to move again here. I mean, this is just par from the course. Could we come back to Chicago someday? Potentially. But I think this is about just giving an opportunity and seeing what you can do with this product you've established now.
Yeah, there's a great chance to move this around, like how we've talked off air before about how the NFL draft has moved around from different city to city. And that was a technicality of how that all started. I remember you explaining that with the whole New York City thing. But great opportunity for different fan bases, different markets to be able to see NASCAR on their streets, in their downtown or uptown areas. And with San Diego looking like that might be a possibility, with Mexico not confirmed on the schedule for 2026 just yet, too, here's an opportunity for NASCAR to kind of jumble up or free up the schedule and move things around. And we know NASCAR kind of got stagnant with the schedule for a few years, but they haven't been afraid to mix it up the last few years. So this will be an interesting follow. I know we didn't get the NASCAR schedule till later in the year last year, but will we have a quicker schedule? There's never a right time for that to get announced. It just kind of happens on NASCAR's terms. But next year's schedule will be very interesting to see where this all continues. If this is the swan song right now for Chicago, I hope we get a full race in because we haven't seen a full race play out with this, with darkness last year, the rain the year before, or I'm having those mixed up, but nonetheless, I want to see a full Chicago street course race and see this play out.
Yeah, I do too. It does sound like that speculation is that Chicagoland is likely to come back to the schedule. And the way that this next gen car runs on the mile and a half so well, Chicagoland makes a ton of sense. Its sister track is Kansas Speedway, and Kansas Speedway is one of the best tracks in the circuit right now. And the rumors, reports have been out there that Chicagoland is in great shape. Mexico City, I think, is going to stay on the schedule, but they're going to have to find a bye week or something to work that in. Sounds like San Diego for a street race would probably be earlier in the year, maybe kind of bring back a West Coast swing of sorts to start the season. But with that said, Chicagoland, I'm a big fan. I think that makes a ton of sense for NASCAR to stay in the Chicago market. I know Joliet is actually pretty far away from Chicago, but it's still within the market enough in a good track that I think that would be a win for NASCAR to move the street race, but bring back Chicagoland and stay in that market.
I think it would be a great opportunity as well because you're the third largest market in the United States. You have what Chicago's home to what, from 4 to 5 million people, somewhere in that ballpark. So there's a great chance. There's a great chance to continue the racing there and continue the momentum that the street course has provided for NASCAR. And you're not too far away. And plus, it's an old facility. And I shouldn't even say old, it's a newer track, but a facility that NASCAR is very familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be great to see if they could make that happen. So with Chicago this week, Dom, who kind of catches your eye here? Obviously, SVG, of course. Bowman had the shocker last year. We'll get to our picks coming up later, but to me, this is going to be fascinating to see how this race plays out. It feels like these last 2 years we've seen some between the rain being a factor involved, some crazy pandemonium involved in this race.
And I think what's even more interesting, too, we'll talk about this in a minute, but the entry list. We have for the first time, I believe in this next gen era, outside of the Daytona 500, you have more than 40 entries for the NASCAR Cup Series race. Someone's going home in qualifying. With the five open cars, someone's packing their bags and hauler and leaving early. So that's going to be an interesting follow too, because you have some good, really good open cars that are going to be attempting this race. We'll get to that in a minute. That catches my eye too.
Yeah, yeah, certainly, certainly so. We'll see how it all unfolds. Let's get to our news and notes, Dom. Our headlines in this week, and got to start with some news involving Daniel Suarez. We saw this, but I don't think anybody's caught off guard by this, but still big news nonetheless.
Yeah, we'll actually get to that one in a minute. One we missed last week because it happened after our show came out is the purchase and agreement to sell Rick Ware Racing. So Rick Ware Racing and TJ Putcher have, I believe I'm saying that correctly, the former owner of Spire Motorsports have agreed to have the team be sold off at the end of the year. So no price was reported on the deal for the NASCAR Cup team, according to the Associated Press. But nonetheless, you have the 51 team being sold off. They want to keep everything intact. They said Cody Ware would still be the driver going forward, but we have some ownership move there, and just curious your take on that. What's going to change? What differences are we going to see with that organization moving forward?
That's going to be fascinating because I saw a statement from him say that he's going to keep Cody Ware in the car and that he wants to win races in the NASCAR Cup Series with Cody Ware. And I'm like, that's an oxymoron. You cannot win races in the NASCAR Cup Series with Cody Ware. So he says he wants to invest money, he wants to compete, but then he wants to put Cody Ware in the car. To me, that just doesn't add up. That doesn't make sense. So, Rick Ware Racing has been kind of the back of the field. They had a partnership with RFK for a while and had Justin Haley there. And it seemed like that they were trying to make some improvements, but just never really started clicking. Rick Ware's had all these charters and he sold them off and such. Um, I don't feel very optimistic about things necessarily getting better and turning around as long as Cody Ware is still their driver now.
Yeah, and I know the other charter that they have is on loan to RFK Racing, and NASCAR has it where you can only X amount of years lease out that charter, and you have to have it back. And if you're in the bottom three of those charters, NASCAR can revoke it. We saw that with Starcom Racing a few years back, where they told them, "Hey, you either got to sell it, or we're going to take back the charter at the end of the year." So that's why you saw the Starcom people and Derek Cope and everybody sell off what they did. So is that same situation here? I don't know on the surface, but clearly a move is being made here. This 51 team has been at the bottom of the barrel of all the chartered cars, and they seem to try to find speed. They brought in Ryan Newman a couple years ago after Cody Ware was out of the car. Justin Haley, like you said, and he didn't even finish out the full year last year. So yeah, outside of a super speedway, they're going to have to bring on somebody else in Cody Ware if they want things to change. But that could also be a provision of the sale too. Hey, I'll sell you off the team. We got to keep Cody in the car. Wouldn't be shocked if that was part of the deal.
Yeah. Here's another thing that I was thinking about here too, Dom. You look at what happened in the off season with the JTG Daughtry program. Tad DeSchechter and his wife, they ended up selling their team, to Hayek Motorsports. I don't even know who the actual ownership is of that, but Tad DeSchechter and company and Jody, Tad and Jody each they exit the sport. And now they've taken on a role within RFK Racing and Brett Koger with them, but they're not in an ownership capacity. You see Rick Ware stepping away. And then, Legacy Motor Club even recently sold the majority share to Jimmy Johnson. And we've seen, that ownership group with, the GMS guys taking a step back a bit, with all that considered, Dom. I think we're starting to see some of these smaller teams that their owners are seeing that, hey, it's getting expensive to compete in sports, and that they are getting out because they are realizing, hey, you know, prices are going up. These other teams are investing a whole lot more money. We just don't have what it takes to compete with some of these top-notch teams. Tony Stewart, another one that exited the sport last year. I mean, we're seeing some kind of under the radar changes with these smaller teams right now, with ownership wise.
And I would even, like you said, Tony Stewart. There's been some big names that have left the sport too. So it's not just one part of the field or the other. It's kind of all across. Does this move the needle much for this team? Hard to say. Everyone's going to come into their own different ideas and bring on their own people. But the sport is getting very expensive. And then with the looming charter situation, the lawsuit with Legacy Motor Club and Rick Ware over that charter too. I think all that weight on Rick Ware, he probably this is not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot to take on. A lot happening behind the scenes people don't know about. Go ahead and tell us about Daniel Suarez here.
Yeah, so not to undercut you there a few minutes ago, but big news there too with Trackhouse Racing and Daniel Suarez agreeing mutually to part ways at the end of the year. Daniel Suarez announced on social media and took to Sirius XM radio that he could talk about it now on July 1st, Monday or Tuesday, July 1st rather, that he will not be returning to the 99 team in 2026. No replacement has been mentioned at this point in time. Connor Zilisch. got to be thinking Connor Zilch is going to be the driver that takes over that ride 2026, but nothing has been confirmed yet at this point in juncture. Dan Suarez says there's no ill will, but rather he's actually looking forward to the next chapter, that this has been the best team yet that he'd been with in Cup. Is he a hot commodity, Tyler? Is there another Cup team eager to bring him on, or do we see him revert to the Xfinity Series where he is a past champion? He's got that past championship visual. We've seen him be competitive in Cup equipment, but hasn't been to that bar that we have seen Ross Chastain at.
I think he still lands in the Cup Series. He's still got money. Remember, people forget about CommScope and his relationship with them. He's got funding. That's part of the reason why he moved up to the Cup Series so quickly. Was CommScope, who was formerly Aris, was partnered with him for a long time there. So that bodes well for Daniel Suarez. But he made the playoff and won a race last year. I think he can land on his feet somewhere. Maybe not a quality of ride like Trackhouse, but whether it's a team like Front Row Motorsports or something like that, Daniel Suarez is going to have a spot in the NASCAR Cup Series. As far as going to Connor Zilch goes, I know he's young and he's still learning ovals and all this, but he's picking it up so fast. The truth of the matter is, Dom, I think this is an easy decision for Trackhouse. I know he's young and he's still learning, but he's so good on road courses and he's figured out the ovals. I could argue that right now, Connor Zilch has just as good a shot to make the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs as Daniel Suarez does, and he's only 19 years old, and he's only going to get better from here. I think this makes a ton of sense.
Justin Marks looking like a genius, scrapping Zane Smith last year and that driver development program. Connor Zilch waiting in the wings. That team is being set up and primed for a very, very good 5 to 10 years down the road. They're going to be a consistent contender. Let's be honest, Connor Zilch is going to do a lot better than Daniel Suarez will in that car.
Yeah, yeah. Will there be some growing pains? Of course there will. But I think it's going to pay off for them down the line. Uh, any teams come to mind for you that would be a good fit for Daniel Suarez?
The one we just mentioned, that 51 team, if you want to elevate the program, you want to talk about bringing something that would be a little step up from Cody Ware, it would be Daniel Suarez in that 51 car, but they've already committed apparently to Cody for 2026, so that'll be remaining to be seen. But maybe JR Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, if he's looking to go full time and maybe do some more Saturday racing, that 9 car could be a good fit for that. And winning how he did a few weeks ago in Mexico City, winning, as David Starr likes to say, fixes a lot of things. And there's that good relationship there with JR Motorsports and Dale Jr. So opportunities, possibly, but I think we will see him in some sort of car at some point. Funding is everything. That almighty dollar is everything in the sport. Daniel Suarez has plenty of that to bring wherever he goes.
Dominic, we will see him in some type of car at some point. All
Yes,
right. That's the bet right there. Big if true.
big if true.
Uh,
Historic moment.
yes. What are the odds looking like here?
Who do you think's the odds-on favorite? And what's the odds, Tyler?
SVG and probably like 200 or 300.
Yeah, I know you're in the ballpark. SVG at plus 225, the 2023 winner. Last NASCAR driver to win their debut in first in over 60 years is your odds-on favorite for the Grant Park 165. Coming up next, though, Christopher Bell plus 800, Kyle Larson at 850, Tyler Gibbs plus 950, or Ty Gibbs rather, and Tyler Reddick at plus 1,000 would be your top five. You have to look at plus 1,800 for Alex Bowman or 18 to 1, last year's winner. Chris Buescher shares that same odds per the Caesar Sportsbook. And you start looking down the list. Kyle Busch, Austin Cindric plus 4,000. Drivers that have performed well at road courses. Denny Hamlin plus 4,500. The one that always gets me, Tyler, because we saw him do so well in the sixth generation of the NASCAR vehicle, but the next gen has just not been his bread and butter road courses. Brad Keselowski's opening odds coming in at plus 10,000 or 100 to 1, sharing that same odd with Corey Heim, who is an open car this weekend. So you look throughout, there's a lot of scattering. Joey Logano, too, plus 6,000, who's a former road course winner, but just hasn't put it together on the road courses. It seems like Penske doesn't have the best odds when it comes to these style tracks. They were the top of the board last week at super speedways, not necessarily in this road course next gen era, but always fun to see the road course odds and what odds makers think are going to be your long shots and favorites and everybody in between. The road courses provide a good opportunity for some upsets.
Yeah, it feels like it's SVG versus everybody. If SVG goes out and does what he's supposed to do, SVG wins this race. But if he has mechanical failure or if he spins out or something, then everybody's got a chance. I heard Joey Logano come out this past week or so and admit, Dom, that the Mexico City race, he said, I hate to sound this way, but I'll be honest. I got excited when I heard that SVG was sick. And I'm like, all right, everybody's got a chance all of a sudden. SVG's not feeling so well. And then he still went out there and won the race. And he's like, man, even when he's down, we still don't have a chance.
Yeah.
Uh, Basically, what Logano said, to paraphrase him. So I think the easy pick is SVG. But if something were to go wrong, um, watch out for AJ Allmendinger. I'd put it that way. I'll go with SVG, but I'm keeping tabs on Allmendinger. That college program's quietly done nice the last few weeks.
And I look at redemption from last year. SVG is probably going to be the class of the field, but if for some reason that 88 car is not at the front and at the top of the scoring board at the end of the race, Tyler Reddick has been strong at these two races. I think Reddick would be your guy. And real quick, before we get to our Ask segment, you have five open cars, Tyler. You have Will Brown racing for Collie, Austin Hill in the 33 for RCR, Josh Balicki back to the garage 66, Corey Heim in the 2311 67 entry, and Catherine Legg in the 78. In your opinion, who's going home? And of those drivers, who would have the best opportunity to compete for a really good finish, if not the win on Sunday?
I think Will Brown's got the best chance to compete with his road course experience and being with a team in college that's good on road courses. That would be the one. As far as who's going home, um, it sucks because these are friend of ours, but I just had to be brutally honest here. Um, Josh Bilecki running for Carl. I was happy to see David running last week, but man, was that rough seeing the lack of speed that Carl put out there. I mean, that car was 3 seconds off the pace in qualifying. And how many laps down did David get? You know, it wasn't David's fault. Uh, People know what I'm talking about here. Car was just had no speed of any kind. Um, and then you look at the 78 situation with and Josh Bilicki's in that car. And then the 78 Catherine Legg, I think BJ's probably going to have more speed than what Carl is, but I think Josh Bilicki right now is a much better NASCAR driver than Catherine Legg is. I think Catherine Legg's got a long ways to go here. So I think I would lean towards Catherine Legg getting in because the 78 should have more speed than the 66, but I think it comes down to those two.
And with no rain in the forecast Saturday, it's looking mostly sunny. You can't fall back. I believe the 13 would miss the field if it was a rain out with Q, but probably going to come down at 66 or 78 missing the field. But I do agree with that 13 car looking really, really good for Sunday. But Corey Heim as well. Look at how well he raced at Lime Rock Park this past weekend. A very
Yeah.
underrated road course racer, in my opinion. What a great track to come out at. And you want rookies making tough starts. I know that was the Chase Elliott thing in 2015. Put him in the toughest races and the toughest tracks. They're doing that with Corey Heim this weekend as well. So really cool to see how this will all stack up.
No doubt. No doubt about it. All right, before we get out of here, our mailbags. We got to make picks actually. Uh, I took S. I took SVG. Is SVG your pick?
SVG is my pick as well.
Okay.
But Tyler Reddick's the backup. Who's your backup if SVG is not at the front?
AJ Allmendinger.
Okay.
AJ Allmendinger. Okay. Mailbag time. Submit questions to us. David Star Podcast, gmail.com, at Star Podcast on X and on Facebook is where you can find us there. And we got one question in the mailbag this week. It comes from Rocco. Rocco wants to know, guys, what are some road course ringers, guys in other forms of motorsports that you would like to see attempt a road course race? Dom, we'll start with you.
Oh man, great question. When it comes to mind would be from IndyCar, Alex Palou.
Yep.
So great on the road course. Maybe that's a low hanging fruit, easy answer or not, but would love to see what he could do behind the wheel. I would also like to see Lewis Hamilton in a cup car. We saw a lot of the F1 guys come over and run some of these next gen
He's
vehicles.
tested a cup car. He did a swap with Tony Stewart a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Lewis Hamilton in a cup race at, say, Austin, maybe an F1 track where he has raced at. That'd be really cool to see.
Yeah, he did that test at Watkins Glen with Tony, and they both had a hell of a time with that. I think those are some good ones. Um, I think one that would be really good if they can work out schedule wise. Um, Pato Award was not too pleased about how the NASCAR got to run Mexico City and IndyCar didn't. I think it would be great if he got to run in his home country in the IndyCar race in Mexico City. I think that would be a no-brainer to see him get that opportunity to do so. Um, you know, Shane Van Gisbergen's an incredible story. I imagine that there's some other V8 supercar guys that could potentially get a shot and could compete similar to what SVG did. Um, you know, I think right at the very top, Max Verstappen has got to be mentioned as another possibility. We have this ongoing debate about who's the best driver in the world. Is it Verstappen or is it Kyle Larson? And like, let's get them on the track together. I don't care if it's F1, if it's sports cars, if it's NASCAR. Let's see what they can do head to head. And Verstappen, he is a NASCAR fan. The guy has been known to be racing NASCAR trucks at Talladega on iRacing from time to time. Those are some names that come to mind, but I think that we'll see some more of these road course specialists start to kind of come back because Don, that kind of went away for a while in the last several years with such the focus on teams pursuing that driver championship. You used to see all the time where a road course ringer would step in for a full-time driver if a team was struggling or if they had a young driver. Those days are long gone now.
No, long gone, long gone. SVG kind of reignited that though, and that's I think why we're seeing Will Brown race this weekend. I believe they were former competitors in Australia, so Brown has made some races before, but to see him in a really good car too this time around, be very fascinating, fun to watch. I think there's going to be a lot of people that will try to replicate SVG's performance, not only this year, but at some of the road courses in this next gen vehicle moving forward. How can
Yeah.
you not?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. It would be fantastic to see. Dom, before we wrap and get out of here, what's going on with you this week, man?
Yeah, this is always a great time of year for personally with family, with birthdays and anniversaries and celebrations. So it's going to be a lot of fun to celebrate my mom's birthday anniversaries on that side of the family this week and Fourth of July, of course. And we're not barbecuing, Tyler. We're cooking out. We're cooking out for the Fourth of July, but nonetheless, it's going to be a great time to do that. How about you?
I'm headed to Little Rock, Arkansas this weekend. My sister is there right now doing an internship, and going with my mom and dad. And we're going to go see her and have a good time. And I'm not going to disclose too much. I'll kind of tell Dom off the air, but it's a pretty exciting time for our family right now. And so we're just kind of soaking this all in. Uh,
We'll hear about it on the show next week, maybe.
no, not
Yeah.
anytime soon. There's
Oh, okay, okay.
the record deal, but it's some cool stuff going on, and I eventually at one point I'll be allowed to share what we're talking about, but it's pretty cool stuff. We'll put the checker flag out in this edition of Let's Go Racing. Subscribe to the show, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Also on YouTube, leave us a 5-star review or don't leave us one at all. Hit us up on X and Facebook at Star Podcast. Email davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. This show part of the Studio Soapbox Network, the Jones Report, as well as the Coach Bo Knows podcast and all podcast platforms. For Dominic Aragon, our entire crew, Tyler Jones, thanks so long. It's been another edition of Let's Go Racing. See you next week.